Good afternoon. My name's Dylan Howard, and today I'm going to go over my journal article summary, which is From the Technical Know-How to the Free Flow of Ideas, exploring the effects of leader, peer, and team communication on employee creativity by Leah M. Hodges and Crystal D. Ackerman. This article dives into the communication amongst working group peers and teams within a creative organization. The intent behind this article was for the authors to examine the different creative influences and communication characteristics that lead to a successfully creative organization within the video game industry. So, communication distinctively influences employee creativity among peers. Some big takeaways for this article is how communication distinctively influences employee creativity among peers and both within the leaders of the organization. So some of the research points that Leah Hodges and Crystal Ackerman found is creativity communication isn't necessarily bound between the leader and the employee. There's a part in that, but also it discusses the influence that a peer-to-peer communication has. This process is seen more as an informal mentoring session. So an example given was these employees were allowed to go to the bar during the middle of the day. And again, this is the video game industry. So they were allowed to go to the bar in the middle of the day, and actually their boss gave them their own credit card. And they went and they were allowed to creatively free-throw ideas at a bar, not necessarily in a workplace environment, but the goal was just start talking and start thinking about the different processes and things that they need in order to make their game successful, and being in a considered hands-off environment in a bar actually led to a lot of creative ideas and a pretty successful idea that came out of that. The article also highlights how informal communication is just as important as formal communication, from the employee to other employees and the same employee to their leader. The article introduces what's called a contextualized work group concept. And what this concept does, it explains creativity on the different levels as examined. So employees nowadays spend a lot of time at the workplace, right? It's 2020, that's just how it is. Before COVID, people spent a lot of time in their office. 40 hours to 60 hours a week wasn't too uncommon. So one of the big things that this article found was your leadership interaction between individual employees and then employees to employees kind of mirrored one or the other. So essentially, if leaders had an open and honest communication with their employees on the employee level from the peer-to-peer type of communication, it modeled the same thing. This contextualized work group accounts for the dynamic of both relationships, which is pretty important, as it allows an organization to have kind of the same process across different facets, again, from that leader to the member, and then from the member to the member. So really, you can analyze each one of these relationships in a vacuum, but with a contextualized work group, some of the time, or most of the time, you can look at them at the same thing. So in essence, creative leaders build this type of free environment, which allows employees to engage in creative communication and problem-solving ideas in both an informal and informal way, which creativity, I think, thrives in both of those environments. The article highlights how coworkers use feedback and support in the workplace to foster this creative and innovative type of thinking, which leads to direct tangible results, i.e. a successful video game from a video game tournament, from a video game company. Studies show that peer support may be more creatively influential than leadership engagement. So if an employee deems that their peer-to-peer relationship in the workplace is pretty strong and supportive, then creativity has been proven to thrive in that type of environment. Not necessarily more so than if creativity would thrive in the environment where their boss supported them, but in a peer-to-peer type environment, if there's a strong supportive base, then creativity does flow freely there. The article also dives into team communication and the effect that this has on creativity. High-quality relationships can lead to enhanced team outcomes across multiple perspectives, all looking at the same problem in a centralized, focused mindset. Successful teams are fostered through interdependence of responsibilities and collective goal achievement. Again, this shows that peer-to-peer relationship where separate work groups kind of working towards the same goal, but as long as they interact amongst each other pretty effectively, then creativity, and if they perceive that each group is supporting them, then creativity does flow through ideas because it eliminates that lack of judgment or that fear of judgment. Moving on, there were 4 pervasive themes throughout the research that Hodges and Ackerman found creativity needs in a workplace setting. So first, formal and informal leadership among mentoring from experienced employees. So this kind of goes back to my original analogy or experience of people going to the bar and having a drink in a locked off environment. That's a little bit more of an informal session, and a formal session would be a meeting. And so creativity has been proven to thrive in these type of environments where you have both formal and informal communication. So this was dubbed creativity coaches, which would be these seasoned peer-to-peer employees who, if I have a problem, I talk to Jeffrey, who's been in the company for a long time, and he's been dealt with a lot of these problems, but he's not necessarily a leader or manager. He's just a more seasoned individual employee. The next layer to that is these informal coaches also being the leaders within the organization. So you need, in a successfully creative organization, you need both your peers. You need to have well-seasoned peers who you can talk to about ideas and informally, and your leadership also needs to support your ideas informally and informally. You bounce these ideas off of them, and you receive solid feedback on both ends, and that allows you to tailor your work in specific areas given creativity. The third thing that a creative organization needs to have is parameters. So you can't say, here's my project, figure it out, be creative. You need to define certain parameters, and those parameters could be time, resources, economic constraints, stuff like that. Lastly, positive support from coworkers and teams create that crucial sense of comfort within the workplace. So for creative organizations to thrive, they need to feel positive support and teamwork at all levels. So I can't be hammered for throwing out an idea that I think is creative and other people don't like. Like, sure, it's one thing to negatively influence creativity by shooting down ideas, and it's another to hear it but not necessarily act off of it. So that positive support is absolutely vital in a creative organization, again, amongst the leaders and your peers. In conclusion, you need creative constraints within an organization, right, to allow for the free flow of creativity within certain parameters to not get too far off your original intent of the project. Also, leaders need to provide those clear parameters, so they're the ones who impose those parameters, not your peer-to-peer employees. You also need informal and formal communication to allow creativity to thrive in the workplace amongst a well-developed team.